Hi, welcome to the Gear Garage. My name is Zach, and this is my fun little internet show about whitewater stuff. And in this episode, we're talking about 3-point self-equalizing anchors for rafting. And so there's a whole climbing world that uses this stuff. When you're climbing, you're hanging from things, your life depends on it. In rafting, our life doesn't usually depend on it. We're just tying onto a boat that's stuck. If something happens, it breaks, we're typically going to be fine. So this is not typically life or death stuff. It's more like our big raft got stuck, and we need to attach to it to pull it off. And so in the last episode, I talked about 2-point self-equalizing anchors. Most of the time, that's what we're going to use. The 2-point works for almost every example out there. There are times when you need to tie to 3 points, and that might be when you have a huge, heavy gear boat, and you're going to put heavy loads on it, maybe having like 8 or 10 people pulling on a 3-to-1. You might want to think of it at 3-to-1 then. Or let's say you're just desperate. Maybe a D-ring popped on an earlier attempt, and you have to use a handle. And a handle is a bad idea, but if you can spread the load out between a handle and a couple D-rings, it might help. Or maybe there's just old D-rings, and you're worried they're going to pop, and you want to use 3. Or maybe use 2 D-rings and clip onto the frame as a third spot, or a third part of the anchor. Every time is a little bit different. Or sometimes there's just like weird things, smaller D-rings you can tie onto, and you want to distribute the load between 3 different parts of the boat. Again, it's a judgment call when to do it and when not to do it. I would say in general, with a big heavy gear boat, you should try. But a lot of times when a big heavy gear boat is wrapped, you don't have access to 3 D-rings. You only have 2, so you just do the best you can. Anyway, here's how the 3-point one is done. And I usually carry 30-foot slings of webbing, like this one in my safety kit. So my typical safety kit has 2 20-foot slings and 2 30-foot slings. And again, with longer ones, you can just cut them. So if you need a 15 or a 10, you just cut the 10s or 20s in half. And so I'm a big fan of having long sections of webbing instead of a lot of short ones. And so that's just what I do. And to do a 3-point, you really need 30-point. You can do it a little bit less, but 30 feet should be kind of the amount. And you just take it and you sling it through 3 D-rings, kind of like the 2-point. And you tie the water knot, the good old classic water knot. This is a great way to connect 2 sections of webbing to each other to make a loop. And again, this is something that you just got to practice. And the more you do it, the more practice you get, the better you get. And you know, again, I'm a big fan of making it look pretty. So I'm taking my time and I'm dressing it, which means there's no kinks or anything. Looks good to have some leads. And so just kind of like the 2-point, I'm just taking this outside section and I'm grabbing halfway through here and bringing it in. And I'm grabbing halfway through here and bringing it in. And when it all comes together, you have one big anchor to tie onto. And this is where you're going to tie a static line onto, or maybe a throw bag. And in the 2-point, we do a twist in the rope. You don't necessarily need to do that. The nice thing about the 3-point still is as I move it like this, if I pull from different angles, it equalizes. Or if the boat shifts and the boat moves, that the 3 points equalize. If you add the twists in here, it just adds more friction, more challenging things for it to equalize with. And so you don't need the twists. And even if one of these comes off in the 3-point, the system stays attached to the whole thing. So some people say do 1 twist. It's a judgment call. I don't usually do a twist because I like this to be able to move with minimal friction. So that's pretty much it. Once you get set up, you get a static line over to it. I'm attaching a throw bag. I would never use a throw bag in a 3-point. I think that if you're going to 3 different points, you're pulling out the heavy firepower. That's a big old static line to pull. But this is just for example, and it looks something like that. And this is a great thing to practice. I like practicing the 3-point. In reality, it rarely gets used. I can only think of 2 examples I've ever used it. But it's a good way to, if you know the 3-point, the 2-point's a no-brainer. So I like to learn the 2-point, learn the 3-point, but once you know both, doing a 2-point is really easy, and so it's worth practicing. One of the other thing is making a 3-point equalizing anchor happen from inside the boat is really hard. And so again, once you practiced it here on the outside, you should do it from pretending like you're inside the boat, because none of us are tying them outside like this. This is in the water. You definitely want to do a practice round from inside the raft. So that's it. That's 3-point self-equalizing anchors. If any of you out there have ever used one in the wild, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear about it. Again, it's not very common, and it's good for us all to know that it's a real thing that gets used. Or if you're like me and you've only used it a couple times, maybe never, that's a good thing to hear. So that's it for this episode of Gear Garage. See you next time.